Alright, so you seem like a pretty well-connected person in the activist community. But just in case anyone is unfamiliar with who you are and what you are, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of an introvert, so I don't know how connected I am or how many people know who I am, but my name is Lanie. I've lived in Austin for over 20 years, and I lived in Chicago before then. Kind of stood on the sidelines in Austin activism-wise for a long time, but I was involved with Occupy. It was 5 years ago now, 6 years ago. But I also, protested the Iraq War, just didn't get involved with organizing. It's kind of like believing in God but not being in a religious group. I'm kind of a freelance. When people, how you get in a circle and everybody's like, what group are you with? I just say I'm kind of a freelance activist. I go wherever I'm needed. I usually stick around issues of media, research. I'm a mom, so I try and find things that I can do from home. And I know a couple people, so usually I can get plugged in if I need to.
Yeah.
My personal politics? Well, I am an anarchist. I think that means so many different things that saying that is a little like saying I'm a human being. I personally feel like there's not a possibility of actually having worldwide anarchism happening anytime soon. So the way it manifests in my life is I just do my best to cut away all the bullshit that keeps me from doing what I personally want to do. So, and try to make everybody else have the ability to have that same freedom.
Yeah.
So my anarchism externally manifests more in standing for social justice, making sure everybody has access to the things that they need to live a dignified life,
Sure. So how did you become interested in this type of politics?
It's funny because punk rock and zines and all of that stuff was what did it for me. Growing up, I lived in Chicago, in the suburb of Chicago, called Arlington Heights. And I was telling my son this because he's the age I was when I started going to this place, but there was this teen dance club called McGreevy's. And my son thought this was the dumbest thing ever. He was like, what? That's so dumb. But I'm like, yeah, it was this place where you could go and they didn't serve alcohol. And if you weren't under 18, you couldn't get in. So you had to show ID to prove that you were under 18. And he was like, oh, that sounds so dumb, Mom. And I'm like, no, it was awesome. You could go, everybody got drunk in the parking lot and whatever, but you could still go there and meet people that weren't in your school because we were weirdos and freaks. And so there weren't enough of us in one place. And that's kind of the same idea, I think, that zines perpetuate. It's this interest-based organizing where you have a passion about something and you create this thing and you find other people that have a similar passion, and that's how you meet people, whether they live in the same city as you or far away. And kind of that's how organizing works. You don't really necessarily organize by party. You organize by what topics or issues are interesting to you. So my history with zines goes back to that point where I would, you'd get a bunch of kids in the room that were the creative types that, were tended to be punk rock or alternative in some sort. And I learned what zines were when I was 15, and so I started making my own zine because I was like, this is cool. I'm writing my bad poetry all the time. I might as well put it out there so everybody can read it. Why not? What's so bad? What's the problem with that? So I started putting out my zine, Lime Green Bulldozers. And I realized that putting out a zine is more than making everybody else read your bad poetry. It's about community. It's really what got me thinking about community, because I don't think I understood what community meant when I was growing up. My community was very scattered because there weren't a lot of people in my immediate vicinity that I felt I connected with. I felt a little weird, you know? I was a weird kid. And I don't think everybody knew I was weird, but I did. So through zines, I kind of built that community for myself, and met a lot of people that I still know today, and started collecting zines and trading zines, and I'm just kind of a pack rat, you know? And so I kept them. I moved them from Chicago to Lubbock to Austin. I think I still think about the box of zines I left behind in a house that I left here in like 92. I'm like, darn it, what was in that box? Those zines were pretty critical, I'm sure of it. But I've kept all of my zines throughout the years, and people kind of tend to give me their zines, and I still buy zines and read them. And what I love about them, is that your next question?
No. Yeah, sure.
Am I meandering?
No.
What I love about them is that they give, because it is a piece of history, so it gives an actual, my person's perspective of life. When I look back over the zines, if I pull a random zine out of the stack, I can see one from the 80s, with a girl who lived in the suburbs of Ohio in the 80s writing about, I don't know, the stupid jokes her friends tell, you know? Or I'll pull one out of the stack and it's this young anarchist from Canada who introduced me to kind of eco-anarchism and being respectful of nature and trees. Or I'll pull one out of the stack and it's the Maoist I met, you know, when he was an older man who had a band and he was always quoting Mao to me. And so he sparked kind of an interest in radical politics with me. Or the zine I'll pull out that was the guy on death row who just started doing a zine, an anti-death penalty zine, and ended up getting executed. And, you know, I found out about his execution on a television show one day when I was traveling. So it to me, when I would get zines, it was like, oh, these are my friends. But now looking back, it's like a family album of all the different people that have influenced me throughout my life, and reasonable facsimiles of same, because obviously I don't have a personal relationship with everybody in my collection, but it's that, all those little lives, you know, that people don't really necessarily see or hear about.
Yeah. So have you been in the anarchist world for a while now?
You know, I'm a stealth anarchist. I don't generally talk about anarchism. I just am an anarchist. It's funny, a couple of my friends who lived with me in Chicago used to have a roommate that was a big time, one of those, you know, theorizing and getting into very huge arguments about, you know, the anarchist texts.
What is property?
Yes. And he was awesome, but all of us just kind of got in the habit of thinking, you know, that was kind of bougie anarchism to us, because, you know, it was, to me, it's more immediate. But I do appreciate, you know, the history of anarchism and the history of struggle, and whether it's anarchism or any other kind of radical struggle. And I'm constantly reading books about all kinds of people's struggle, and they don't have to call it anarchism for it to be relative to me. So I don't feel like I like to get out there and be like anarchism and join an anarchist club or whatever. It's just kind of the way I am and what I'm naturally attracted to and aligned with.
Sort of action oriented more than just like pure theory.
Yeah, action oriented, and you know, I like the theory of anarchism. I like reading anarchist thought because it's just, that's how I naturally resonate. When I was in middle school, I took a philosophy class. I don't know why, it just suddenly plopped into my life that I was in this philosophy class. And I read a book about Taoism. And I think that kind of was like, I never did acid, but that was kind of like an acid trip for me, because Taoism made me realize, what the hell does it matter anyway? It just is what it is, and stop trying to define it and stop trying to like explain it, just do it and be it. And that's what it is, you know? And so I think that affected a lot of aspects of my life, maybe some to the positive and maybe some to the negative, but that's kind of just how I approach everything, is just, you know, just cut away the things that aren't what you are and then be that thing.
Right. What do you think the most pressing or most important issue is currently that you're most...
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is all of the things. It's funny because my neighborhood here, I moved into this house 20 years ago when my son was a tiny baby, and I've watched this neighborhood become this strange thing where people pay like 4 and 5 times as much as I did to move here, and then treat me like, in some cases, like I don't belong here, you know? So it's definitely not the same struggle that exists in places where people have less latitude to actually leave. But, you know, obviously gentrification is a thing, but income inequality, you know, just inequality in general. If you remove, I mean, I don't know, the state. The state is the biggest issue. I can't even tell you what is the biggest issue. They're all really huge and pressing. And I think the way I can answer that question is what do I feel like needs to be done to address as many things as possible. And I'm starting to realize that the thing that needs to be done is for us to get to know our neighbors. And that's where I was kind of going with that is, you know, I've tried to start organizing a group of neighbors who can talk to each other so that we can get to know each other. So maybe the people that moved in after I moved in here and could afford to buy a much more expensive house don't understand what it's like to live on less. And this is my opportunity to connect with them and on my level as a person in their neighborhood that they have to deal with day to day, that might help them to understand how differences in income affect everybody. And getting to know your neighbors forces you to work with people that don't necessarily agree with you on anything.
Other than like organizing with your neighbors and stuff,
Yeah.
Are there any other tactics that you promote or are interested in doing? Like, do you agree with working within the system to promote your end goals? Or
That's a really good question. You know, the Oh Shit What Now collective, one of the things that interested me most about working with the other folks that I'm working with is I like the idea of I have kind of a foot in each world because I'm, you know, historically familiar with radical activists and radical activism. I have had to remain safe, so I've been able to be visible more, you know, like, and talk to people more about radicalism because I have children, and you know that kind of makes me have to be safe, therefore I can be more public. But I feel like my role in that society is because I've got this other foot in, you know, this world of liberals and moderates to kind of help bridge the gap between them so that liberals and moderates don't condemn the work that radical activism does. And I don't ever feel it comes from the other direction, but hopefully to help you know, radicals understand that in this current society maybe we need a little bit of the organizing for systemic change as opposed to or organizing for reform as opposed to organizing for revolution. Right. So I feel like being in the middle of that is kind of my role and what I like to do. Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about your efforts to try to help with internet privacy and security for folks?
Yeah, when the whole Oh Shit What Now collective started, when my friend Kit and I were just thinking, you know, we should have done this 4 years ago. We should have been doing this 4 years ago, and what are we doing here? Why is it that every time I start to get started locking down my phone, that it just seems like a big hassle and I don't want to do it? And that's really what started the whole collective, is Kit knew that I've worked in several jobs where I teach adults how to use computers, and I address digital literacy with folks in communities that don't have access to technology. And he's taught classes for me in that capacity. So we both have kind of a instructor background. And he had some folks that he felt would be interested in the group. And that was the first training that we decided on because it was so critical, and all of us found like we didn't know what information was accurate. It's hard to find a trusted resource for that information. And it would be so overwhelming to us when we get started that we would just stop and not do anything. So what we've tried to create is a 101 level class where folks that were just getting into activism and or wanting to know more about keeping themselves secure could understand the basics of what they need to do to ensure their privacy and security.
Sure. So where do you think we're heading with the Trump presidency?
You know, my older son I always say he's one of the smartest people that I know. And I asked him after Trump was elected. He was a Bernie guy, but he's very practical, and so he was voted for Hillary. And I asked him, you know, what do you think is going to happen? Do we are you fucked, basically? You know, like, I'm so sorry. Are you screwed now? And he was like, we have 4 years. I think we have 4 years, and then we could still set it right if it's just 4 years. I'm just worried that what I'm most worried about right now is this whole undercurrent of white supremacy and white nationalism. And I'm worried that that's going to be really hard to tamp down regardless of what happens. Like, if Trump gets impeached, what are they going to do, you know? And so I'm worried that we've let that out of the bag and that's going to be hard to reverse. And I was worried about that I wasn't worried about it with regard to electing Obama, but I just kind of figured that, you know, white folks would be pissed off about that and hold a grudge. I know white people, you know, like, I'm one of them, and I'm family, you know. So that's the thing that I think we need to be careful of, because there are going to be repercussions. It's not just Trump. It's this whole, he lifted this rock, and all these people think that they're seeing the light, and we really need to stomp on them. You know, like, it can't be allowed to fester and grow, and it is, and I'm worried that it's too big now.
Yeah.
So
how do we combat white nationalists, fascism, the alt-right? Do we just keep punching people like Richard Spencer?
Yeah.
Or should we engage with them, or what?
It's a hard question. It really kind of depends on the person. I mean, you can engage with some people. I don't think any of those people should be given any sort of platform. I don't think it's a question of free speech at all. I think it's a question of amplifying a voice that doesn't deserve to be amplified. There are plenty of people in the world that have things to say that are more important than kill the Jews. I think that we need to pay attention to what our kids are doing. My younger son was definitely involved in some men's rights-ish kind of stuff for a while. He kind of drifted away from me for a while, and I didn't know that's what he was involved in. He told me later he was kind of into that stuff, and his friend I feel like it's a recruiting thing that's happening with these 14-year-old boys that are angry at the world and all hormonal. And so I think we need to watch our children and watch each other and take care of each other. Yeah.
What advice do you have for other radicals out there who are looking to make political change that you're interested in?
You know, don't go overboard. Start simple. Do something small, you know? It's funny, I listened to this. Now, this is going to sound cheesy considering what I just said, but I listened to this have you ever listened to the Ex-Worker podcast? And sometimes I'm like, I listen to it and I'm like, I can't believe I'm listening to a podcast about anarchism. But it's so good. I had to re-listen to the Democracy episode because I thought it was really good. They just explain things in a way that I would never think to explain it. But they had this young kid write in and say, you know, what can I do as a young anarchist of color who's just budding in my small town? And they were just like, first of all, just be yourself. Be who you are. Find other people who are also who you are, and figure out together what you can do. And if you can't find other people, then write a letter to a prisoner, you know, do a zine, go talk to somebody about politics on the bus, you know, ride the bus and meet a random person and start raving like a lunatic to them. I just feel like everybody should just start small. And I'm one of the things that's really encouraging about the current state of our nation is that people that were so apathetic before, and I hate to say it, but they're alive to me now, you know, like, and they've just come to life. And I'm having to put my foot in my mouth all the time to avoid saying, you know, this is where we were heading. This is the world that a lot of people have been living in for a long time. And I know it's more loud and abrasive now, but it's pretty much the same thing. But it's good that it's so loud and abrasive that they're seeing it now. And I see a lot of my friends just starting really small by standing up to their relatives and having conversations with them, talking to neighbors. I was so amazed when I got this group of neighbors together. It was a group of they were all women. They were lovely ladies, most of them older than me, but some younger, so it was a good mix. And, I never thought I lived next to a neighbor that would be like, fuck the police, but I really might have some of those people in my neighborhood that are just ordinary people that didn't grow up in that culture, didn't listen to rap music in the 80s and 90s, and they still understand, that always amazes me when somebody doesn't come to it the same way I do, and they're just living their life like a normal person, and they have that undercurrent of radicalism in them. You never know. We're all over the place. We're like sleeper cells of radical old ladies waiting to hit you with a handbag.